greasy grind remote. Go for me. Whatever.
Oh, God.
Okay, I'm going to ask members to mute themselves, please. Did you get a response from Hunter?
Hunter, are we live yet?
We are live.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I am the Vice Chair, Dawn Chavez, and I would like to welcome you to this meeting today, May 2nd, 2023, of the Urban Forestry Commission. Amy Smith, our former chair, has resigned her post, and so I am stepping in to facilitate this meeting. All committee members and staff are joining or participating virtually, and we're streaming live on the Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the commission page. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. And for those of you who are joining us or who are with us today, welcome. Just a note about public comment. We will be taking only live comments for today's meeting. There will be 2 public comment periods, one for alternative compliance and one for general public comment for all other matters. At today's meeting, we'll first hear all the alternative compliance cases, then open up public comment for those cases or case, and then have commission discussion and vote. Commissioners, please hold your comments until after the public comment for these alternative compliance cases. After the commission discussion, then we will vote. And then following the alternative compliance votes, we will open up comments to the general public, or we'll open it up for general public comment. Important note for our speakers listening in, you can enter the speaker queue by pushing *3. Please enter the queue now to speak on alternative compliance, which is first on our agenda. And please listen and enter the queue after alternative compliance to speak on all other matters during the general public comment, which is next on the agenda. Staff facilitating the speaker queue can only see you are connected and ready to speak when your number comes in the speaker queue by pushing *3. I will announce when the public comment sessions open. We will now go through and introduce all the committee members who are participating virtually. Again, I'm Dawn Chavez. I am the Vice Chair of the Urban Forestry Commission. I'm also the Executive Director of Asheville Greenworks. And when I call on you, please say a quick hello. Please make sure that your microphone is muted when you're not speaking. And when you have a question or would like to speak, you can unmute. Okay, so I'll do a roll call vote. Check-in. So Cecil?
Hey, I'm here, a former council member, for a while now been member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
Chardon?
Hello, I'm Chardon Dietrich. I'm a member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
Patrick?
Patrick Gilbert, member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
Zoe?
Zoe Hoyle, member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
Karen?
Hey everyone, I'm Karen McNeil and a member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
And Sharon?
Hi everybody, I'm Sharon. I'm a member of the Urban Forestry Commission and a representative on the Technical Review Committee.
Thank you all. And I'd like for the city staff to also introduce themselves. Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy Watford. I'm Zoning and Stormwater Supervisor in Development Services.
Hunter?
Hi, I'm Hunter, planning technician in the city of Asheville and technical assistant to the Urban Forestry Commission.
Keith?
Keith Aiken, urban forester for the city of Asheville.
Chris?
Good afternoon, Chris Collins with City of Development Services Department as well, Planning Development Manager.
Mark?
Hey there, Mark Foster, City of Asheville Arborist, Public Works Department.
And Suzanne Gotzi, are you here for alternative compliance?
I am.
Welcome. And our City Council liaison, Kim Roney.
Good afternoon. I'm very glad to be your liaison. Thank you for the work that you do.
Great. Did I miss anybody? Oh, and Sarah Millar is our a community forestry coordinator at Asheville Greenworks, who's joining me as a Greenworks representative. Okay. I'll be reading each of the agenda items out loud to help our audience follow along. And for each vote, I'll do a roll call vote. And if you, as a committee member, would like to speak, then please raise your hand using the raise hand icon, and I'll call upon you. Okay, we are going to hear from alternative compliance case first.
I think we need to approve minutes from the previous meeting.
Oh, you're right. Thank you for that reminder.
Check.
Okay. Okay, so do I have a motion?
So move.
Okay, Cecil moves to accept the minutes from our last meeting.
Second.
Do I have Patrick seconds? Great. Okay, quick roll call vote. Cecil?
Aye.
Chardon?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Zoe?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, now we can move on to alternative compliance, and Nancy Watford is going to do a brief training for us.
Hi, y'all. I'm Nancy Watford. So Amy, before she left, actually asked to do this. So before we start our first, well, the only case that we have today, very short, hopefully succinct, training on alternative compliance and what this request is and what the basically what the assessment that is charged by the development ordinance, that are the criteria in which you're assessing the request. So basically, what is alternative compliance? It is the process that's set forth in the UDO, our Unified Development Ordinance, in Chapter 7. So that's Chapter 7 of our city codes. It's for projects to request relief from the landscaping requirements set forth in 711.3. So the landscaping code chapter, the one that we're currently working on revising. So an alternative compliance request. So there are some alternatives that are available by right within that ordinance section. So if the ones that y'all see are ones that don't meet those criteria, and so they're coming to you guys to act as an advisory board to the planning director, and you are making a recommendation to the planning director for either approval with conditions, or denial of the request. So it is a recommendation to the planning director, and if there is a denial for a reason, then the applicant has the opportunity to appeal to the Board of Adjustments. That's just the basics of the process, right? And so when we get one in that is asking for relief from the landscaping code, these are the evaluation criteria of which is asked of the applicant to address within that application, but it's also the assessment that you all are to weigh that request as to if it meets these criteria to recommend or not for the recommendation. So So it's basically looking at the physical constraints and conditions of the site and whether that is, and that the request is not attributable to the proposed site design or building design, and that make compliance with the standards, with the standard requirements practically impossible. Physical conditions or constraints are not a result of the applicant's own actions. And the proposed alternative will not present a safety hazard. The proposed alternative will, upon maturity, provide landscaping that is equal to better than the required standards, if possible. The proposed alternative is designed to address plant vigor and health, and it is reasonably compatible with the natural and topographic features of the site and support the purpose of the landscaping ordinance. So that is generally it. Y'all have questions about that? Yes, Patrick.
So it seems in the past, when I read the alternative compliance documents, that the staff planner assigned to whatever project is requesting alternative compliance has already reviewed these 7 criteria and made an assessment that the request meets one or more of these criteria. So when it gets to us, since that assessment has already been made by staff, it's not clear what our role is other than to evaluate that and possibly make some other recommendations in terms of maybe changing the species of a tree or a location of a tree. But the assessment has already been made, correct?
Correct. Like currently staff do a staff report that takes the applicant's information, the application. And sometimes if we have, like say it's a level 1 project, if we have already done an assessment of the project itself, we have some additional background that may help with, understanding the request. But beyond that, yes, we do sort of a general analysis and provide that to you. I mean, we do that with all of our boards.
So I guess my point is that if staff has already gone through the 7 criteria and made an evaluation that the request meets one or more of those criteria, then we can't really go against that.
There's nothing to say that you can't. And that most of the time when staff are doing this, they're looking at what the applicant has provided.
Right.
Because this is what, yeah. So go ahead.
Patrick, I think that the Urban Forestry Commission, with the expertise that the members have and have a different perspective sometimes on the type of alternative compliance that's proposed. And, so it could be an adequate request for alternative compliance if certain planting material is used, or, we have made recommendations that haven't gone against the staff's evaluation necessarily, but have probably enhanced the plan for alternative compliance.
Right. So we've approved with conditions.
Right. Karen?
Hi, this just seems like a good time to make the request that we move forward with getting tree inventories included in this process?
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm not sure that right now is the time to do that in this meeting, but that's an important point to bring up. Nancy, do you have something else to add?
No, I mean, Chris and I can discuss that, and I don't know if it's Article 19 or in when we're working with Vidilla, but we'll look at those options. Yes, Sharon.
Yeah, I was going to say that would impact 711.3 as well as 719 and TRC as well as alternative compliance. So that would be a whole ball of wax, as I would call it, to have to do that to incorporate it. I don't think that would just be alternative compliance.
Thank you. Any other questions about what Nancy presented? Very good. So we will move on to hearing the alternative compliance case for 191 Amboy Road.
This is the alternative compliance case for 191 Amboy Road. It is an existing site. It did actually have, I think, somewhat of a tree inventory. And so the project is required to do full site compliance based on all of Article 11. For the site improvements, because the building improvements are going to exceed 75% of the building value. They're doing very little site work outside of replacing existing things and then adding landscaping within the parking lot and the building impact landscaping. And then there's a new sidewalk along Joyner Avenue. I think that's what it is. Currently between the two zoning districts, with a commercial zoning district up against a RM district or RS district, there's a type B buffer with a reduction of that can be 50% because of the topographical relief that this site currently has. And so the request is a reduction in buffer plantings due to the existing conditions and the steep slope that exists on the site. So this is the existing conditions. And this is a topographic kind of relief map that shows kind of how the site sits, which is that 101 slope and that 101 slope on the front. And then, so the alternative compliance is asking for relief from that buffer to have less plantings in it. They are having existing, so the property is physically constrained with the steep slope on both the Joyner side and Amboy Road side, with it varying from 3:1 to a 1:1. All the existing vegetation is to remain. At the time that was developed, there wasn't a landscaping ordinance. And most of the landscaping is being placed along the flattest portion of the buffer, along the sidewalk area, to minimize the disturbance of the steep slope, and that there's going to be retaining walls that are going to be probably required along Joyner Avenue, and likely safety railings to protect people utilizing the sidewalk. The site is currently wooded, and there's no plan to remove existing trees or existing plant material unless it's deemed unhealthy, damaged, or dead. There's currently 49 tree credits provided through maintaining the existing vegetation for compliance for multitude of the landscaping requirements. And the plant material will be placed in areas where planting is feasible due to the topography. So, and this goes over the sidewalk that they're just doing disturbance and replacing and repairing the existing infrastructure that's already there on site. And then this is the site plan. So you can see they are doing some enhancing of the existing site with some additional landscaping, additional trees and plantings. And that is really it for that. Do y'all have questions? Suzanne, do you want to speak to this, any of this?
Do we save the discussion from commission members until after public comment?
Yes, but Suzanne, do you want to?
Oh, Suzanne. Okay.
Present or?
Yes, absolutely. Nancy covered it really well. Again, I'm Suzanne Godsey with Sitework Studios. I do apologize coming to you 3 times in 3 months. It's turned out that way, and you won't be seeing me next month because I don't have anything coming to you. So this site's unique. It's different from the other 2 that I have brought to you. Those were new construction. So this is existing building, existing parking, existing impervious surface that has been there since the 60s. They have chosen to make this building their main office. So they wanted to renovate it inside and outside and give it a facelift. And so those improvements have breached the threshold of the value of the building. So that, like Nancy said, that triggers site compliance. So that triggers sidewalks and that triggers landscape, most predominantly, and particularly as far as you guys are concerned. So we're able to meet the landscape requirements for the parking lot and building impact, putting in over, 86 shrubs and an additional 13 trees just for those 2 requirements. We're keeping all the existing vegetation unless there's something out there that needs to be taken out. We need to do a little site visit and make sure there's nothing. They're spending all this money to fix this building. We don't want a tree to fall on it right after they get their CO. So we're going to take a look at that. But I expect from being out there a couple of times, everything looks pretty good shape. Just want to see if there's anything that didn't leaf out this spring that might be an indication of some kind of disease or death from something. So as the site section showed, super steep, flat area, then back to super steep onto Amboy Road. We're required to put sidewalks on Amboy Road and Joyner, and I believe we're going to have to request a variance for that Amboy Road section because it's not feasible for us to place a sidewalk there, and there's a greenway immediately across the street. So I am simply tasked for this project to do the site landscape, not all of the site compliance, so I'm not completely dealing with the sidewalks. But I will say, the requirement of the sidewalk on Joyner is eliminating some of the area where we could potentially put some of our landscaping for the buffer. So the way the buffer standard reads, it says that if you have a vertical separation, you can reduce your buffer, but you have to place all of the plant material at the top of the slope. And at the top of the slope, there's no room. It's 3 to 1, 1 to 1 or greater. So what we've done is we have taken a look at where the civil engineer has not put a retaining wall and where we've got some flattish land to provide some type of buffering with the use across the street. So what we have proposed are some larger shrubs and some small deciduous trees because in addition, I believe we have overhead power lines going on that we need to avoid placing some large plant material at the top of that slope. So that's it really in a nutshell. The ordinance wasn't in place when this was built, so there was no thought or thinking of landscape. And we're just trying to bring it into compliance as much as possible. If anybody has any questions, I'm here.
Thanks, Suzanne. We're going to take some public comments. Hunter, is there anyone in the queue?
There is not.
Okay. So we'll open it up for discussion from the commission members. I saw a couple hands raised earlier. Let's see. Chardon?
Hi, Suzanne. I don't see the retaining walls marked on this site map. Could you point out where those retaining walls are going to be installed?
Nancy, can you zoom in? Excuse me. Can you zoom in? You were identifying them. There's a retaining wall right below. If you go back to that, if you go right under site plan, the word site plan, there is a retaining wall that the civil engineer has identified. Not sure if you can zoom in on that. Chardon, I don't have the.
I see it now. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so that's.
And then there's another one on the other side, and it is labeled as well. And those retaining walls are required in order to facilitate a sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not wall, but they are going to require some safety railing at the top of that. And just you know, the use of this building.
Install those.
I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. There won't be any trees being removed to install those?
No, that area up there now is grassed, and there's nothing there's like a shoulder there right now. So the sidewalk is going at that shoulder, and there's the way it slopes off, there's no trees.
Gotcha. Another question I had, and you might have, I might have missed the sentence of you explaining that it might be in the code that I'm not aware of, but why is a steep slope a reason not to install plants?
Well, for this steep slope, it's incredibly steep. I mean, as landscape architects, we don't like to plant on anything greater than 2 to 1, and we certainly don't like to plant large deciduous trees or evergreen trees on anything greater than 2 to 1. 3 to 1 is really our preference. And if you go back to the slope map, we've got slopes that are 1.5 to 1 and 1 to 1, mostly along that area. It's incredibly steep. In order to dig a hole steep enough, you're going to be building little retaining walls in which to hold up a tree pit or a hole for a shrub, essentially.
So I can speak to the ordinance is that if you grade within that buffer yard, they want you to lay it down at a 3 to 1. So this is existing. They'd have to do that. They functionally have to build more walls. It will have to be vegetated from an erosion sediment standpoint. But they can use any vegetation, like any vegetation in the erosion sediment control to do that. So.
And we're not disturbing anything other than what we need to disturb just to build the walls. And because it's on the high side, we're not going to be having to lay back any further because we've got the road, we've got a road to tie into.
Well, looking at Google Maps, it looks like there's some erosion issues above the tanks. And, if you're not planting plants to have root systems hold that bank, is erosion being addressed in this?
The civil engineer is addressing the erosion that's on the site. That's part of his purview and his package. We won't be putting any landscape. Typically, if it's landscape that's for erosion control, that shows up on the civil's plans and the seating schedules that they provide for temporary and permanent seating. And so they'll have that on their plans to address any types of erosions, as well as erosion control that, the site improvements might need to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand, not wanting to plant large, trees or materials on a steep slope. Something that, and this is maybe a different conversation, but something that I see pretty frequently are trees planted on slopes, not perpendicular to the slope. It's pretty common in the landscaping industry to dig those tree pits and have that mound on the downhill side. And working on trees that have been like that for 15 or 20 years, it causes real issues. And so I would as a professional, I would like to see things planted perpendicular and using smaller plants, you can achieve that. The last question I have, thank you, Suzanne, is what is the tree in the middle? It was marked as existing canopy, and it doesn't really show up on Google Maps when I look at it from satellite. It's right next to the tanks.
I'm looking at my plan on my computer. Hold on just one second. I don't have any trees that are marked to remain by the tanks.
I see it's outlined by blue, existing canopy.
Oh, that's actually a structure. That's you pull in, and if you look at the site section, it's actually a built structure. It's not tree canopy. Sorry about that.
A different kind of canopy. Got it.
Okay. Metal canopy. Right. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Gotcha.
Okay. Sharon,
Good question, though.
your hand up.
Hey, Suzanne, a couple of questions. Are the retaining walls over 6 feet where they have to be planted with vines?
No, they're not.
Okay. And I have a problem at the developments I look at TRC where they're seeded over by the engineer with grass seed. So what we have is we have a whole load of banks that are hydroseeded and or matted, and then we have all this junk, to put it politely, coming up in between it later on. I've had that on a commercial property I'm dealing with now, and where they took trees out because of a storm water work. So I personally would rather see some live staking going on, where there's some natives that can be live staked on the side of a hill that don't necessarily have to go into a large tree, but they can be, I mean, we've live staked smaller species of trees that will take a hold, and even shrubs as, gosh, I'm trying to think of the last one that I looked at that we live staked that had serviceberry. We live staked serviceberry. We live staked several other more native species of shrub that hold the hillside in, that just isn't grass that will die out. Now, some of the grasses that come in are perennial, but they have to be maintained, weed whipped, or some of them are just short, tough grass. But it ends up looking pretty messy in the long run. And I know you can't get trees on there, but if you get a smaller live stake, you can get some more interest going on a hillside. I know you're not required to do that. You know, I know it's not something, but it beats what the city likes to do, which is just have someone hydroseed something, you know. So that's my comment on that. And then I haven't had a chance, and you answered the question in the beginning. I've been too busy to drive by and look at this site. Do you have any idea? I know everything's just now starting to leaf out. How much loss, how much dead wood and dead trees you've got in the middle of everything else that's there?
I don't think we have a lot. Honestly, I mean, if we do, it's going to be maybe some younger stuff that was just beat out through competition. Everything looked okay when I was there, but you know, when I was on site and pre-planning, everything hadn't leafed out yet.
Yeah.
So
will they go in and then chainsaw it out and remove it, or are they going to just let it all be all jumbled up with, as Boatcatcher Mountain looks? I like to use that as an example, because that's an example of everything growing into everything and nothing being able to really do really well. You know?
I am not entirely sure of what their plans are, to be honest with you. I mean, I think we just want to make sure that the site is, you know, this is going to be, more people are going to be coming to this site and they're going to be coming into the building. They want it to look nice. So, I mean, I would imagine that they're going to keep everything as nice as they can. But, you know, there is some significant vegetation out there. So,
yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Karen?
Hi, so yeah, this is sort of more of a process question. If you do decide to remove vegetation, is there any permit process or oversight for that, since it's decided sort of after this part of the process?
I don't think so, because this redevelopment projects aren't required to do tree canopy, even though we meet the tree canopy requirements. We're not required to do it, and we're not required to have a tree canopy plan on file. So I don't know, Nancy, am I misspeaking?
No, no. The one thing that if for any of the trees that they take for credit as part of the landscaping code, if they remove those, then they would have to replace them to meet the credits. So when you have an existing tree, based on how big it is, you get a certain number of tree credits that go toward your landscaping compliance. So sometimes the larger trees count for 2 or 3 trees, actually. So they would have to go in and replace it based on that calculation of what was required and what they were how they were claiming those credits, like which one it was applied, which requirement it was applying towards.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so, and you are using some of the trees on the site for tree credits, right?
Yes.
So I guess, and this is not particular to this proposal at all. I'm just curious procedurally, again, how, like, we have these guidelines, but how we enforce them. So if somebody can go ahead and remove trees without any oversight after they go through this process, that's sort of what I'm hearing.
So we have a zoning final inspection where we go out and make sure that they've met the requirements.
Okay, so at that point you sort of see if any trees have been removed and figure it out from there. Okay. Yes. I was just curious because I'm still learning how this works. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Karen. I'm seeing no other hands raised at the moment. I will ask if there is a motion to approve this application for alternative compliance. Cecil?
I move to approve this alternative compliance proposition.
Thank you. Have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Cecil?
One real quick question.
Oh,
did we already do the public comment?
Yes, there were no public.
Sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
Thanks. So Cecil, you said aye?
Aye, yeah.
Okay. Chardon?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Zoe?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Thank you, and I vote aye. So that passes. So we're going to move on now to public comment and on general matters. Hunter, is there anyone in the queue now?
There is not.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is staff reports. And the first one up is Mark Foster for the City Arborist report.
Afternoon. We have our contractor has about all of our trees in the ground, and I've been working on treating primarily park trees for emerald ash borer to protect them from that. Let's see, the last couple of days I've got about 15, I guess, trees treated so far. I hope to do some more treatments on Wednesday and Thursday. I need to go out of town next week, so I wanted to get with the program with the treatments since everything greened up so early this year. I didn't want to fall behind with that. We've had a lot of business for trees falling out of the woods or off of properties into the road and onto other things. And so that's really kept us hopping. All this wind we've been having lately, it's been a real pain in the butt. So other than that, pretty much routine business. Any questions?
Sure enough.
Hey, Mark. I had a question about the plantings that are being installed. Is there anybody inspecting those?
Yes, there is an inspector who is usually with the contractor, but if he is not able to be with them, he follows back around and checks off on the trees that have gone in. So yes, there is.
Is he a certified arborist?
No, Chardon, he's not a certified arborist. I have one certified arborist who works for me, and he is my lead climber. Good luck getting other certified arborists to want to work here at the city.
Yeah, yeah.
If you got any you want to send this way, though, please
yeah,
point them toward our human resources department. Yeah, let them know we have vacancies.
Yeah, I'm concerned by the lack of root collars being above grade and the excessive mulch on the trees that I've been seeing go in around the city.
Are you
And
thinking of this
maybe the inspector, does he have a checklist?
Are you speaking
Lord,
specifically
I mean,
of the ones from this year on my site? Because I don't know if you have my list. I haven't shared that with you. So if you want, I can share the location list with you so we can speak specifically about these ones that are happening that this inspector is overseeing. I certainly don't want to have soil over root flares. I hadn't noticed that being a problem. That was something that we coached the contractor about. Most of the trees are actually in the central business district. Are these where you're seeing the concerns?
The most obvious one that comes to mind is the one at the, I can't remember the name of the park right now, but along Merriman, just above W.T. Weaver.
Well, then I didn't plant it, so I don't know. You can probably inquire with the Parks Department. I'm not the only silo in the city that has planting going on. There are other departments that have projects that come up. So you might want to reach out to Rebecca Cipriano, who is with Capital Projects and Parks and Recreation. She's a landscape architect, I believe, over there. But,
so there are other departments planting trees, and their oversight is not by a certified arborist.
I can't say what their oversight is over. They are not my department. I don't live there.
Yeah, it's just a curious fact. I mean, I going back to the premise of the city being the gold standard, and the, being held to the highest standards of what they want to see in the public. What I see on the plantings, whether or not they're in your department, it's pretty subpar.
Your expectation of what the city represents or is supposed to have or whatever is not necessarily in alignment with what actually exists in terms of the presence of ISA certified arborists in city employ. I can't make that any different for you, but
I guess my point is, wouldn't it be great if it was? Wouldn't it be great if certified arborists were involved and required to be involved in each planting that the city puts in?
Sure. And then they might be able to be retained by the contractors. They might not. I mean, this is all, we'd love to see these things, but these are not required things citywide, and it's just, it doesn't exist. So
we can follow up with the Parks Department and other departments that plant trees and see if they have oversight or, and if they do, what that looks like. So thank you for your question. Are there other?
Thanks, Mark.
Karen, you have your hand up.
Hi, Mark. I was hoping to get an update on the municipal golf course trees, if there are any updates on those.
I bet Chris would be the best person to speak to that. And I don't see him on the meeting quite yet. He must probably still be at his Civic Center meeting. I know that we were working on trying to work something out with the contractor, who's not actually a direct employee of the city. He is a contractor for the company that runs the golf course with us now. So I know that Chris and Eric from legal were pursuing some options. I don't know there was necessarily fining. It might have been in a reduction in what the contractor was going to be paid for the work, which would amount to the same thing eventually, not making as much money. I know I want to see soil decompaction where it's required. I don't have a clear idea yet what the specific locations for that are. To this point, any discussion of vehicles on root zones and so forth has been kind of vague in general and hasn't really given me any good actionable information. I do also know, though, that as disappointed as I was to see work being performed during rainy periods when the soil is particularly prone to compaction, not all the equipment that was in the vicinity of the trees was, quote, heavy equipment like a chip truck or a dump truck or something that I would definitely not want to see underneath the drip line of the tree. Some of it was lighter equipment, which is pretty standard to use in tree care operations underneath a tree. So, but more to come. They're working on it.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mark? Thank you for that report, Mark. Mm-hmm. And the next staff report is Keith Aiken with the Urban Forester update.
Thank you very much. So I guess since the last time we met, I've been doing a lot of education, just kind of familiarizing myself with all the ordinances. I've started to go back through and make some changes in those ordinances, little things here and there. Up to this point, probably mainly in the tree canopy protection ordinance. I've been making some suggestions there. I've also been working on, different plans and, different people to approach for developing the forest management plan. Just kind of reaching out to different organizations who maybe aren't representative or have not been representative in the past. And, one of those is I have a meeting coming up on Friday with the Asheville Homeowners Association. And so I want to get their kind of intake on, some of the legislative bills that are going through the Senate or North Carolina House right now. And then, just see where we can best serve them as well, because they are certainly a user group and someone that is in direct impact of what we do and what we write here as far as ordinances and, getting things approved and that sort of thing. So, but other than that, still, going over tree canopy protections of different cities, looking at different ordinances, trying to lay out an education calendar for myself, conference calendars, that sort of thing. And then trying to work on the species list as well, trying to pull those species list in from a couple different sources. I've just been recently going back over the Asheville tree map, which I'm kind of deciding whether or not that data is any use to us or going forward. I know there's a lot of trees on that map that aren't within the city limits, so I'm kind of wondering what use that that program or that software has going forward. And then that's pretty much about it right now. I mean, I have a bunch of new ideas, but I don't want to post anything out there yet until I could figure out where we're going.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Keith.
Cecil.
I really hope you make progress on the species list. When I was first elected to city council in 2009 and became the liaison to what was then the tree commission, they were already trying to resolve the recommended species list at that point. And it still hasn't happened. I mean, we still have different lists apparently. And that blows me away. How difficult can it possibly be to get the government to agree with each other about the recommended species? And if you can resolve this, you'll be a hero.
Well, I'll do my best. I understand that. Yeah, I mean, I'm still seeing it in a bunch of different places, but I think we can get it resolved and have everyone kind of, focus in on one species list, because it makes no sense where and why they are in the ordinance right now.
Sharon?
Hey, Keith. So I don't know if you're probably aware that there, for a lot of us, or a few of us that are remaining, that we have worked on different ordinances. Like there was a working group that worked on 719, and we spent a lot of time and energy working with the city on drafting and getting that implemented. So I'm wondering, I'm not sure of what the new order of things are, that when you say you're making changes in 719, one, if those are you're gonna review those with us for our opinion before they go on to wherever they're going to go. Because I don't know, you're probably going to be lucky. I'm going to be off in December, but I'm going to have an opinion on what happens and what doesn't happen. One, because I'm sitting on TRC, and I pay real close attention, to what the ordinances do and what they don't do. And I think that everybody else on the committee is also going to be curious on the changes that you see that you want to make. And that we all weigh in. Now, what happens after that, I don't know. But, and then which brings me to the recommended species list. I know that I've worked on the recommended species list with past people. Karen has kind of taken it by the horns now and added, but there are several species that are being used on development projects that are extremely columnar. The new sycamores, let's say, the new, my brain is not working today, but that are very, very columnar, and they're being used on landscaping as large trees because they're in there, but they're not essentially a large tree due to the canopy. So I was having issues with a lot of these new species that are going in on TRC that are large species, but they're very columnar. They'll only have a width on them of 4 feet, 3 feet, but they'll be 20 feet tall. So Ed and I have discussed whether that should be counted as a large tree. So there's a lot of information that we've already spent a lot of hours on. I don't know whether you're interested in, working with anybody or hearing what we have to say. I'm not quite sure how we at UFC work in with you and what you're doing, and how it ultimately will benefit the city and make your job any easier.
No, I'm completely open to sitting down and talking with everybody, and hearing your feedback and that sort of thing. I mean, certainly as we're continually to write and rewrite some of these ordinances, certainly want to get everyone's feedback. I'm sort of a person who does a lot of networking. So I want everyone's feedback as far as the commission, and then also some folks on the outside who may have better experience with what we're seeing. Now, as far as your comment on the large trees, I think our only stipulation on the large trees is based on a height requirement. I'm not sure what that's necessarily a canopy width requirement. And so, maybe that's something that we should, could put in the ordinance or find its way in the ordinance, that there is actually at maturity, a canopy width. But right now, I think the only thing that designates a large tree from a small tree is height.
Yeah, and Ed, as Macy, who has contributed a lot of time and energy, has developed one at in Georgia, and I'm blanking out. I want to say Decatur, but that's not it. And it's a lot more specific to what meets a large tree requirement in a small root area. Like I'm getting like southern magnolias. I have one job that came through that had about 30 of them, and they're planted in a lawn. And all of us here that know that we get 40 inches of rain, and if you're going to irrigate that lawn, that a southern magnolia isn't going to do well in that location because it doesn't want to be that wet. Or they're putting them as parking lot trees, which is called VUA trees. So I will make a comment on it only because I know that it's not going to grow in that little tight area. And so they're making changes in 719 and in 711 with root volume requirement. So that's all, all of it is, and Chris is on here and he'll probably attest to all that. All of that's all going to tie in together. But when we have southern magnolia on our recommended species list, then they think that, well, okay, I'm going to go put that because it's a pretty tree. And the designers on this one are coming from Raleigh, and it does really well in Raleigh, but it's a iffy tree here in this location, depending on where they're going to put it. So we've got all of that weirdness going on that I'm noticing in the technical review committee. How we hone that down, I have no idea. But I'm just letting you know what I see. And then with the changes in 719, I think Chris is probably going to talk on that. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And Chris and then Nancy.
Hey, just real quickly to add to what Keith said to your question, Sharon, about how these amendments will come forward. It'll be a familiar process to the Urban Forestry Commission. There is that subcommittee that I'm blanking on the actual name of, but that we work with frequently on these ordinances as we develop them. So we will work with the subcommittee again. And once the draft is shored up, it'll come before the whole Urban Forestry Commission, because we would like to move it forward with a positive recommendation from this group.
Thanks, Chris.
Chris. Yes, that's the policy working group, and there's an update on the agenda from the policy working group in a minute. Nancy?
Yeah, so part of that work will be updating the SSDM and therefore finally getting rid of the two fragmented species lists.
Thank you.
But we will work forward with that. And we do have specifics to the columnar trees and so forth. And it depends on what type of credit they're asking for and whether it falls under 11 or 19 as to how it is credited. If they're columnar, they are not credited as a large canopy for Article 19.
Thank you. Sharon?
A real quick question. Are we going to go over the landscaping draft code that I printed when we get down to policy working group? So I'll say my question then. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Keith, are you doing the tree protection ordinance report, or is Nancy doing that?
Well, that's me, but
Okay.
I'm training him on it. So part of this is also that Keith will be your staff liaison to the Urban Forestry Commission. We are transitioning that role. So hopefully by July, he will be that person.
I'll be ready in July.
Okay.
Right now, I'm going to table that to Nancy, and then
and also to that, Hunter Spitzer is your staff liaison assistant. So start copying them, and you can leave Haley off. But that's it. Are there any questions about the TPO report? Okay, good.
Great, thanks. So moving on to old business, we have this question of the July meeting date, and there's 2 dates in play as alternatives, which are June 27th or July 11th because of the July 4th holiday. So is there any discussion on those proposed meeting dates? At this point, we're not considering other meeting dates.
And they would be at the same time at 1 p.m. They would be virtual as we are for now.
Okay. Sharon?
So July 11th, I'm going to be out of town. It doesn't matter, but I'm voting for the June 27th just because I'm looking at my calendar now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, people have lowered their hands. Okay, so let's vote on moving the meeting date. First, we'll vote on June 27th as the possible meeting date for the Urban Forestry Commission. I don't know if I need a motion for that, but I do.
I'll be happy to make a motion that we have that meeting on June 27th.
Okay, thanks.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Charlotte. Okay. So roll call vote, Cecil?
Aye.
Chardon?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Zoe?
Aye.
Karen? Sharon?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So that motion carries. We'll be having our next Urban Forestry Commission, not next, our instead of our July Urban Forestry Commission meeting, it's now going to be on June 27th at 1 p.m. Okay. Working group updates. I can provide the budget request working group update. Is that after City Council meeting last week, I think, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I have no concept of time, but the last city council meeting, yeah, it was last week, that Greenworks had encouraged people to contact their city council members to advocate for funding for the urban forest master plan, be included in the FY24 budget. It was just an encouragement. There was no vote taken on it or anything. Subsequently, several people who had sent email messages to council members received a reply from council member Maggie Ullman that said, basically, good news, this will be included in the FY24-25 budget. So, hooray. But the clarification there is that FY24 budget is, because the fiscal year starts July 1, it straddles 2 calendar years. So it's really a FY23-24 that starts July 1, 2023. So that funding for an urban forest master plan would not be approved until the budget that starts July 1st, 2024. Kim?
Yeah, would it be okay for me to add a little bit of additional perspective and clarity from the budget work session?
Yes, please.
So, as some of you may know, that we do have a city council budget retreat where we identify our strategic priorities, which are the agreements that influence our budget plans and policies throughout the year. At our budget retreat, so this is my third one as an elected official. I've been to many retreats for the past 8 years, and it's the first time that I've ever noticed that the council didn't narrow the final decision. What we saw in the last budget work session is that staff took an opportunity to help narrow the very long list of our brainstorming session. So if anyone is interested in gaining some more information on where the budget process currently stands, it may help to review our last budget work session. The council budget work sessions are archived on the city's YouTube channel. One of my key takeaways is that having seen the presentation from staff where they took our 71 positions from the budget retreat and narrowed them, that it missed, in my perspective, the opportunity for council to finish doing its job, which is to be able to instruct staff with at least a majority of council supporting issues. For example, of the 71, it appeared that only 3 council members were supporting an urban forestry master plan, though I was not asked. So we still have some work to do. And so this year's budget process, as far as the council position, is not finalized. And we have, at our last budget work session, asked staff to schedule a follow-up work session with council so we can finish doing the work of our retreat and narrowing the scope. That is our role. And in that process, I would say that we would be making positions for the staff and directing the staff on the 23-24 cycle. So this is really important because a lot of things can happen in a year, right? A lot of things have happened to all of us in the past year. So if we're talking about what's happening in 18 months to 2 years, there's still a lot that can happen in between that. So it's not clear to me that council has been asked to define the outcomes of what could happen in the 24-25 cycle. This would be the first time I've ever known us to have a 2-year projection on that. So just as a process, we do have the budget work session. We do have a budget retreat. Those things are opportunities. Those meetings are opportunities to inform the staff. But we are still very much in the middle of our budget process. And so, you know, I did receive a number of emails from the public about this, but not as many as I would have expected. So hopefully that gives you a better picture of what's happening this year as we move towards the budget adoption in June, which will start July 1. And also we will go through a whole nother process of a retreat and affirming our position and direction for staff moving into the 24-25 cycle, but that will be happening once again about 18 months from now.
Thank you, Kim. Patrick, you have your hand up.
Yes, Madam Chair. I would recommend that the Urban Forestry Commission write a letter to the council asking them to please set aside funding for an urban forest master plan in the upcoming FY24 budget, which begins July 1.
Thank you for that recommendation, Patrick. Any comments on Patrick's suggestion?
Here, here.
Okay, Sharon?
Yeah, do we need to make a motion in order to make that happen?
Yes.
Patrick, you want to make that motion and I'll second it, or Cecil will second it?
So I move that the Urban Forestry Commission send a letter to the city council members urging them to put funding in the FY24 budget which begins July 1st for an urban forest master plan.
I second that. Do we have to designate who's going to write it as I look at Patrick?
Okay, well, let's get to that after I take the vote.
Oh, that's like discussion. Okay.
Yeah. So any discussion? No. Okay. Being very efficient. Okay, Cecil?
Aye.
Kim, did you have your finger raised? If you want to.
Sorry, I was trying to toggle between the screens. It's my understanding that we already have a recommendation from the Urban Forestry Commission to fund an urban forestry master plan in this budget cycle. So I just wanted to confirm, because I'll be sending this in a report as your liaison to the full council, that this is a letter following up or reminding council that the ask is for this budget cycle. Is that my understanding correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. And so the motion is still on the table. Cecil voted aye. Sharon?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Zoe?
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
and I vote aye. The motion passes. I already have a letter written that I can share with you all and see for your comments and suggestions, if that's okay. Not to take that away from you, Patrick, if you want that. Okay, great. So that's the update from the budget request working group. Kim, please.
As your liaison, I just want to make sure that I have a couple of things. One, there's a draft letter already available. This group has affirmed that they are reiterating the request for an urban forestry master plan in this budget cycle, and that with my report, I could include the previous recommendation, understanding that it did take at least 5, if not 7 years to get the urban forester funded. So we just want to make sure that I have this documentation correct. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll include the previous recommendation as well.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for everybody because I don't know the answer to this. So if we approve the drafting of a letter, do we need to come back at the next meeting and approve that letter by vote? Or can that be done in between meetings?
My view is that we trust you on this letter and trust what we've already said before, and better to get it in sooner than to wait.
Is there time in our agenda today to just read it? Is it longer than a page?
It is a little longer than a page, but about a page. And I might need to make a couple of revisions. I was sort of angry when I wrote it, but so I'll make some edits as I read if I read it out today. Zoe?
My understanding, this letter would be based on the budget request that we worked up before, which did not specify FY23. That's the only big difference that I would see in the recommendation. Is that correct?
Okay. If you say it doesn't specify the fiscal year, I don't remember directly, but yeah, so that's a little different, but it is a reiteration of our request.
Yeah.
Patrick?
Yeah, sorry. Am I on mute?
Nope, you're unmuted.
So I would second Cecil's position that we would trust you, Madam Chair, Acting Chair, to draft a letter and without any prior further approval from the commission. I would only ask that you, before it goes to the city council, that you share it with the commission.
Yes. Even after I said it was a little angry, you still approve. No, I'll definitely share it with you all.
Okay.
And welcome comments. Okay, I just didn't want to breach any protocol. Kim?
I just, so you know, I pulled up the liaison report from February 7th. The budget recommendation to fund a comprehensive urban forest master plan was motioned by Cecil, seconded by Karen, passed unanimously at 1 hour and 34 minutes into the meeting. It does not say that it should be for this fiscal cycle in the motion, but in the liaison notes, it does say fiscal year 2023-24 budget recommendation, and that you sent a report alongside this email. So it would really truly be just a reaffirmation of your existing recommendation for this budget cycle.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, well, moving on to an update from the policy working group. Patrick?
Yes, I'll address the amendments to 719, the tree canopy preservation ordinance first. Those discussion on those amendments were put on hold by city staff in order for the urban forester to review them and weigh in on those amendments. My last communication with Chris Collins is that he and Keith were to sit down and go over those. I think it was either this week or last week. So I would either ask Keith or Chris to give us an update on whether that review process has been completed, and then we can schedule a meeting between the policy working group and staff to go over those amendments and make final decisions. So, Chris?
Patrick, since I've been in communication with you on this, I will update you on that. Yeah, Nancy and Keith and I have been looking at the draft ordinance as you've seen so far in the policy working group and the comments that the policy working group has made on that document. We've made a lot of progress. We are still chasing down a couple more things, but should have kind of a shored up next revision draft. Nancy and Keith, don't get mad at me for making a commitment here, but next week. So once we have that ready, I can reach out to you, Patrick, if you don't mind being the primary contact there, and we can get a review session scheduled.
That's fine. Does anybody have any questions of Chris or Keith on that? Okay, good. Thank you. I'll move on to chapter 20. Ed Macy has taken the proposal that the policy working group submitted to staff and staff's proposal that they submitted to us. He's gone over that and distilled the differences down into bullet points. And we also been working on language related to heritage or historic trees to make sure that that language meets any legal muster. And the policy working group will, I'd like to convene a meeting of the policy working group next week to go over that, both the bullet points and the language on heritage and historic trees. And then we can schedule a meeting with staff and hopefully drag this chapter 20 ordinance revision over the line and get it to the city council. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're on mute, Dawn.
It was bound to happen to me once. Okay, so thank you, Patrick. And the next item on the agenda is also yours, Patrick, which is the Missing Middle Housing Task Force.
Yeah, so the Missing Middle Housing Advisory Committee had its initial meeting last Wednesday, which was followed by a public presentation by the consultant on the Missing Middle Housing Initiative. I'm just going to give you the very high-level synopsis and then sort of narrow down to how this all may affect the work that the Urban Forestry Commission has done. The purpose, the focus of the Missing Middle Housing Advisory Committee and the consultant will be on two areas. One is the barriers to providing missing middle housing and opportunities to build missing middle housing in the city of Asheville. I'm going to focus on the barriers because the main area identified as a barrier to providing missing middle housing is in the Unified Development Ordinance, and more specifically the zoning code. So as it stands right now, and particularly in residential zoning districts, the only thing that can be built are single family homes. So the main barrier to missing middle housing is that single family zoning residential neighborhoods would preclude building duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, 8 dwelling unit buildings, and condominiums that would provide missing middle housing. So in looking at other barriers to missing middle housing, would be one area would be trying to reduce the cost of building missing middle housing. So taking those things together, two things that would be in play in terms of being identified as a barrier and possibly making exemptions to would be the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance 719 and the Landscaping Standards 711-3. So I can see where developers and architects and other people related to the building industry would see the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance as a barrier or hindrance to building missing middle housing. In addition, the landscaping standards. Dealing with the removal of trees or protecting trees has been a major issue in other cities that have dealt with missing middle housing. So I, as the representative of the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods, and I hope working with the representative of the Urban Forestry Commission, would like to develop some kind of collaborative group within the Missing Middle Housing Advisory Committee so that we can begin a discussion about how to protect any further erosion of the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance, as well as our landscaping standards in terms of the Missing Middle Housing Initiative. So I'll leave it right there and ask if anybody has any questions. None? Okay. The other thing that we have to do is Amy Smith was the Urban Forestry Commission's representative to the Missing Middle Housing Advisory Committee. So we need to replace her on that committee. And I'm going to recommend that we appoint Zoe Hoyle as the Urban Forestry Commission's representative to the Missing Middle Housing Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Patrick. I don't think that requires a vote. So if Zoe is willing, then I would, as the acting chair, like to appoint Zoe to be the UFC representative on the Missing Middle Housing Task Force.
I am willing, and I think Patrick very succinctly outlined what the work will be on that committee. Although I think you mentioned something to me, Patrick, about a state law that might allow some pushback on our standards.
The only state law that, it's not a law actually, the only state initiative that I'm aware of right now would be Senate Bill 317, which would create workforce housing developments on 10 acres or less. And as the bill stands now, it would exempt the tree canopy preservation ordinance and landscaping standards from being implemented in those projects.
So that would be something that we just need to keep our eye on.
Right, that's separate from the missing middle housing initiative. But I created a missing middle housing overview for the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods. And I'll be glad to send that to you, Zoe, and I can send it to any other commission member who would like to see that. And then Zoe, you and I can schedule a meeting to sit down and go over this more in depth.
Thank you both, Patrick and Zoe, for taking up this charge. And we will move on to new business. Some of the new business is that we now have a vacancy with Amy Smith resigning from the Urban Forestry Commission. And I also want to say that Amy did such an incredible job as the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission for a long time. And I really admired her service and am missing that a lot right now as I try to step into those shoes. So I would like to recognize her formally in this meeting for her years of service to the Urban Forestry Commission, and I know that she still remains dedicated to tree canopy protection and urban forestry issues. Cecil?
So we need to, at some point, appoint a new chair.
Yes.
I'm not sure about the procedure, but I'd be interested to know, Dawn, are you willing to do that if we were to all gang up on you and appoint you?
I'm flattered, but no, I am not able to step up into the chair role in a permanent way.
I know you've got a lot of other responsibilities.
Yes.
So perhaps we need to chat amongst ourselves. I don't think it's urgent, but I'm sure you would like to be relieved of the duty ASAP. I guess one question from my end would be, is there someone else who would like to be the chair? We'll find out.
Yes. Well, in addition to voting on a new chair, we need to fill the vacancy so we have a full slate of members on the commission. And the new way that commission boards and commissions seats are being filled is on a quarterly basis. So the next opportunity we would have to vote on a new member will be in October 10th. And so that seat will remain vacant until that time. And yes, Patrick, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I did discuss with both Amy and Dawn, have discussions with them about the next chair. And I did express a willingness to step in and become the chair of the commission for the remaining part of this year.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Patrick, for that. And I think that with your experience on the Urban Forestry Commission and on boards and commissions in general, that you would be an excellent chair. Thank you for stepping up and offering that. Sharon, did you have?
Yeah, it's going back to when we look for a applicant for the UFC. I don't know how people get chosen, but I would like to say that if we could get a contractor that's familiar with looking at plans, because from what I understand, TRC is still going to be a voluntary position at the UFC, and it's not going to be handled by our urban forester, which I would like to see happen. But I think a contractor that's available to looking at plans and understanding layouts that be willing to volunteer their time at TRC, because again, I keep stating I'm gone in December, and TRC I think is an integral part of what gives us information of what's going on in the development community as it's happening. So I'm just throwing my 2 cents in if there's a contractor that applies, but I don't know how our choices are with that, but that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Sharon. Yes, the call for applications goes out for open boards and commission seats, and members of the community are invited to apply. Nancy, would you like to jump in here?
Sure. So Sharon,
Yes.
yes, we are going to have Keith take over the UFC seat on TRC.
Yes.
That will probably come with the Article 19 and 11 updates.
Yes.
So take, all the stuff associated with tree stuff to council together.
Yay.
So for the vacancy is currently listed on the website, so it is open, but it will be advertised in the fall cycle when they do a big push through CAPE and that sort of stuff. CAPE being our communications department. And so the deadline for applications is August 27th. And then for an appointment of October 10th. So once the liaisons to overall boards and commissions receives those applications, they will filter them to both Dawn and Patrick for recommendations to City Council.
And the process that we have followed has been pretty simple, and I would like for it to be not more complicated, but just I guess more transparent about the criteria that we're looking for in a commission member, and just how we go about selecting that person. In the past, Amy and I have had a discussion and went through the applications and picked a couple and talked it out, and that's a very simple process, but I think that we lose some good input and perspective from other people when we do it that way. Cecil?
To formalize this, I nominate Patrick Gilbert to be the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Okay, so doing a roll call vote. Cecil?
Aye.
Chardon?
Aye.
Patrick?
I'm not going to vote.
Okay. Zoe?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Congratulations, Patrick, and thank you so much for stepping into this role as a chair. So you can take the meeting from here. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you.
So I have under new business working groups, but I'm not sure what that's about. Okay. It looks like, Nancy, you're not sure either. So I'll just, maybe that was left over from a different meeting.
Oh, Amy was on some of the working groups, and if anyone wanted to, it opens up. I think she was. I'm gonna have to look back at the last agenda to see what she was on.
Yeah.
But if anyone, that's what that is. If anyone want to participate in a working group that they weren't currently on, then there's some openings.
Okay, thank you. Patrick, then Zoe, then Karen.
Yeah, Karen McNeil has graciously offered to take Amy's place on the policy working group. So she'll be working with us on that, on those items.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Karen. Zoe?
Yes, Amy was on both the Urban Forest Master Plan and Fee in Lieu. So we could use a person or two for both of those. And I also wanted to ask what, I've forgotten where we were in the process of Fee in Lieu. I know we had developed a recommendation, and I believe we sent that letter to City Council, maybe, to Kim. Did we do that?
You did.
Okay.
Yes. Any recommendations that are formally made by the commission, I send a liaison report and also copy all the members. So you can certainly use those liaison reports as a receipt to follow up directly with council members individually, including myself.
All right, thank you.
And so there is an opening or two on the Urban Forest Master Plan / Fee in Lieu working group. And you don't have to come forward at this moment, but keep that in mind that that group could use a couple of additional members. Okay. All righty. Well, that brings us to updates from Greenworks. Well, shall do. So we celebrated Arbor Day on April 29th by planting 100 trees at the Hardesty Lane Nursery that Greenworks operates on city property in East Asheville. And we had a number of volunteers come out, including our urban forester, Keith, was there planting trees barefoot. I looked the other way, so I wouldn't worry about liability issues, but we getting in touch with the earth. And it was such a beautiful day, and we had such great volunteers, and were able to plant 100 trees in about 2 hours. So it was a good day. And those trees will be used over the years as for plantings in public places like street trees and other places where the trees need to be a bit bigger before they're planted. So these trees will be ready in probably 5 years to be spaded up and distributed, especially in areas that are most prone to extreme heat in the summer. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this at the last meeting, but we're also, Greenworks has submitted an application to the to NASA and NOAA, and to be part of this National Urban Heat Island Mapping Study. And we were selected, and that means Asheville is going to be participating in the study this summer. I'm not sure if the date has been nailed down yet, but it will be a day, try to pick one of the hottest days in the summer, predict that, and then have a slew of volunteers going out and mapping 100 square miles of road, 3 times, the same roads 3 times in one day. And so we're very excited about that and what the implications are for helping us identify where trees are most needed in our city. Yeah, Sarah, I saw you come on screen. Do you have any other Greenworks updates that you want to share?
I'm sorry. No, I had a great time on Saturday, even though I was barefoot, but I was actually earthing. You know, I was so I was, you know, doing good by myself as well as doing good for others. But no, I had a great time, and you know, it enjoyable just talking to the different people who were there and why are they there and why they like to help out. And Wicked Weed was there with their representative planting trees as well. So I think it was all good and done. I was expecting myself to show up on WLOS on some video clip, but it didn't make the reel. So I guess we have to, I guess that's fortunate considering that I was wearing dirty overalls and, a feather in my hat and that sort of thing. So it might have looked a little weird, but yeah, I had a good time.
Great. Thanks for being out there, Keith. Really appreciate it.
It looked Asheville.
Yeah, you're representing properly. And then another thing I wanted to mention is that the U.S. Forest Service has a grant program through the Inflation Reduction Act for community and urban forestry that the federal government allocated $1.5 billion to this grant program. And so grants will be made that can be for a period of 5 years. The minimum grant amount is $100,000. And the areas that the grant program covers are exactly what we need for an urban forestry program in the city of Asheville and elsewhere. It can cover tree inventories and master plan development and community engagements and resiliency plans and workforce development plans. It's like a whole slew of things. Greenworks is planning on submitting an application, and we just love city support on that application, or I would support the city in an application for funding. I think that, if funding were allocated for an urban forest master plan in the FY24 budget, that those funds could be used as matching funds for this grant if we were to get it. So I think the time is right. We're not going to have another opportunity like this anytime soon. And once the funds are granted, they're not going to have another grant cycle each year. This is it. And so we could get in for funding not only an urban forest master plan, but also a comprehensive urban forestry program for the city that would help us with the implementation of what the plan comes up with. Cecil?
Is there some particular way that we can help move toward that? We as the Urban Forestry Commission, or individually?
I have sent an email to our council members and the city manager, an assistant city manager, to advocate for their participation in this funding program. So, if you could do the same, that would be helpful. I'm not sure if anybody has suggestions on how the commission can be supportive or helpful in this process. Please let me know. Patrick?
If Asheville Greenworks is the recipient of the funds, how does that work in terms of an urban forest master plan, which would be a city plan?
Right. So, ideally, the city would partner with us on this application and could be the recipient of the funds, or we could contract with the city to distribute those funds in some way to help cover the cost of the urban forest master plan. But they would be the city would be the entity that manages the urban forest master plan development It would not be a Greenworks urban forest master plan.
And when would these funds actually be allocated?
So the application is due June 1st. I am assuming that it will take 5 to 6 months for the process. They're going to be inundated with applications, and so I would see that taking like that long to maybe start January 1st.
And would you want the Urban Forestry Commission's support in urging the city to be a co-sponsor with Greenworks for this grant?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Does that
Mm-hmm.
require a motion?
Probably. I'm not sure. I'm not asking for the Urban Forestry Commission as a whole to endorse, but if individual members could contact their city council members, that might be good. I think the time is it's a very quick turnaround time too, so I can't delay. Zoe?
So Greenworks would be the actual applicant, or would the city need to be also be an applicant in order to fund the master plan?
So I should be more clear. So Greenworks is submitting an application for urban forestry programming that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And we can also partner with the city on a separate application that it would be preferable for the city to be the applicant, and we could support that application. That's then having to go through us and back into the city. I don't think that's a good model. Thanks. So Kim?
Yeah, I just have a process idea. It sounds like because Greenworks would be applying essentially for a partnership or relying on a partnership for this funding, I would suggest if you're going to make a motion, do two things to keep it real tidy. One is I would suggest that one might recuse Dawn because of the connection with Greenworks. And then that a other Urban Forestry Commission member could, because you would have to vote to recuse Dawn if that's the case, and then go through a process of recommending that the city pursue the funding for this partnership. It doesn't necessarily have to be done in this meeting, but one reason one might consider doing it, because you're already uplifting the recommendation to fund the Urban Forestry Master Plan in this budget cycle, you could pair that together as a package and say, here's what we recommended in February. We're reminding of the recommendation to fund it, and here's an opportunity to partner for the funding. So it provides a solution along with the recommendation you've already made. But by recusing Dawn, who is at the table in the Greenworks role, it provides that layer of acknowledgement that there might be a conflict of interest if this board saw that there might be one, so that you could move forward with a recommendation of that to go alongside with your previous recommendations.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Patrick?
So I would take the first step of recusing Dawn from any vote on any recommendation that the Urban Forestry Commission would make in terms of requesting the city to partner with Greenworks on a grant application to help fund the Urban Forestry Master Plan.
Second.
So Patrick, I think maybe, I don't know if it matters if I can call the vote. I can't because I'm being, I wouldn't vote.
The tedious thing is then the person who is recused can just
step out.
Okay. For that one. And because we don't have a vice chair, Patrick, since you made the motion, would you be willing to do a roll call vote in the absence of a vice and chair position right now.
Sure. So you've heard the motion, and the motion has been seconded. Is there any discussion from the commission members? If not, then I will call the question. So all in favor of the motion by roll call, I'll start with Cecil Bothwell.
Aye.
Karen McNeil,
Aye.
Zoe Hoyle,
Aye.
Sharon Summerall,
Aye.
and Chardon Dietrich,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So the motion passes. So
Okay, with that one in place now, Dawn is still recused from the rest of the conversation as a recused member. So at this point, we could hear a recommendation for the city council regarding the funding recommendation partnership.
I move the Urban Forestry Commission urge the city of Asheville, the council, to partner with Greenworks in attempting to secure funding from the IRA bill regarding reforestation of our city.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's
If
moved.
I might ask, are you also suggesting that the funding be for specifically an item, or is it in general for reforestation? Is it specifically for the master plan, for example?
I probably should have included the master plan, so I would ask that that be amended.
Does the seconder agree to the amendment?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then the motion has been amended. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. You've heard the motion, it's been seconded. Cecil,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
Zoe,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Chardon,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So the motion passes.
Okay, so following up, thank you, Patrick, for picking up the baton on that one. So now I will be sending the February recommendation, the updated reminder recommendation, and this third recommendation for the IRA funding, including a recommendation to urge council to partner with Greenworks. And now that that is passed, you could continue the regular part of your meeting with your interim chair, Dawn Chavez. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you. Yes, that was very helpful. Got some clarity around that. And thank you, everyone, for supporting that. I know we're all eager to see the Urban Forest Master Plan come to fruition. Well, there's no further items on the agenda. Yes, Sharon?
Yes, sorry. On the landscaping draft code, which is a complete change of what 711.3 is now to what it will be. And so I'm not sure when that's going to go before discussion on this through us and the policy working group. I know that Ed was on it. I was on it at one time, but I pretty much think that the draft is finished and Vidila has submitted it. So there needs to be some kind of discussion. But what I'm wondering is if there's thank you, Nancy. Is there a deadline on this darn thing?
Oh. I think he had a targeted date to go to P&Z. But all this with council's schedule may get pushed back because we haven't taken it to anyone or to some of the other groups that also need to review it. So, but I think he was targeting June to P&Z, which means August, July, August-ish probably, to council. That was the last time I spoke with Vidila about it. But the plan is, yes, to bring it to you guys, probably as part of your working groups, maybe, for an in-depth dive. And because you all have it, right?
Yes, and I've been
Okay.
reviewing it, but I think I'm the only one that's really dived into it. And I've got some questions and the usual, because the language has changed a lot.
Yeah. So we're also working on reviewing it, but it is moving forward. I think we may try and target to bring, council had requested in the past for us to bring both Article 19 and 11 together to council. So we have some coordinating to do, but
if I could, we need to, there are some things that are being removed, like building impact trees are going to be removed for various types of reasons. And which brings me a discussion that I think should go before the UFC. Some of this should come to all of us to discuss, because I don't know how many is left on the working group on this with Ed being off of there. So if that means that we'll have discussion the 29th of June, that'll be our last opportunity to discuss it collectively. If it's going to go, we don't have our July meeting, and then it'll go before our August meeting. So what I'm concerned about is discussing it.
Do you want me to invite him to the June meeting?
Probably.
Okay.
And that would be the June 6th meeting.
Yeah.
The June, what's the date, June?
June 6th.
And then there's another one that was the July meeting that we moved to June 27th.
And we're still at target dates. I don't know if any of this has actually gotten on P&Z or council's calendars.
Well, then maybe that'll give me more time to do June 27. But maybe it'll start with June 6 and move to June 27, I'm thinking, because of the amount of changes. And I'm only saying that because there is no real subcommittee, I don't believe anymore, that's been working on this per se, now that the draft is done.
He hasn't picked up that group again to get staff haven't gotten to their kind of finalish draft. So he hadn't I don't think he's reached out to that group again yet to revisit it until we get Keith's stuff in there and some feedback from staff and
because I'm on that group and haven't had any information on it. So when I saw it on the agenda, I thought, well, I wonder where we're at with it. So yeah, we should start with June 6th and then discuss it, and then probably end up June 29 if it's not being pushed to P&Z before that, but it doesn't sound like it.
Yep, and I'll reach out to him and ask him to come, see if he can come June 6th, and also check in about when if he's gonna reach back out to y'all, and when that might be.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, Patrick, did you have your hand up again?
Yes, Sharon, were you suggesting that this come before the policy working group?
Well, we used to have a policy, but that's when it was Ed, Vidilla that were part of and I think you were on it also. And then it started formulating with staff behind, and then the, what's that called? The the stakeholders looked at it and made some adjustments. So there was a stakeholder revision, and then I was waiting for the final revision from the stakeholders to come through. And so I think it's done now with that. So I think what we've got now, I'm not sure, is pretty well what it's going to look like. But it does need to be discussed in depth. And if you're willing to go through it, I am. And then Ed, if he is, I know Ed's not on UFC, but.
Right. So Vidilla moved some people from the open space task force into this task force to discuss the changes to the.
Yeah, that was part of that.
Correct.
Right,
Correct.
and as
But-
you were, but then there came a point where I kind of sort of just stopped. I participated to a point and then just let it formulate to have opinions after it was all done. So we could use an additional person or two that wants to get into the weeds. When I say the weeds, I mean really the weeds. Chardon, if you're willing to volunteer to get into the weeds on this is going to be very important to what our development looks like in the future. And anybody else that's willing to wade into the weeds.
Right. So the
I don't
UFC,
mind wading in the weeds.
so the UFC policy working group never worked on this. But if you want this to come before the group to review, we can do that. I just
Oh,
need
I
to-
see what you're saying. It formally wasn't a UFC because it came from the open space. I see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah, you are correct. So I think then, and what you're saying is that we need to form a working group, a UFC policy working group.
Well, we already have a policy working group. It
I
can
mean,
come-
on the changes of the what's it called, the landscape draft code.
Okay. Why don't you and I discuss this offline?
And if anybody else is, I mean, is that appropriate to ask if anybody else is interested?
Sure.
And Chardon and anybody else that wants to look at an ordinance?
I could be interested.
Yeah, interesting it is not, but but it's necessary at this point. All right, so Patrick, you get in touch with me, and then we'll reach out to the other two people that are volunteered, and we'll work on it because it's 22 pages.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm done.
Okay. Well, I think we're completely done
Yes.
with our meeting. So the next meeting again will be on Tuesday, June 6th at 1 p.m. online, be held virtually. And Cecil.
I move we adjourn.
Oh, I learned that we don't even need a motion to
Motions.
adjourn.
No
I can
motions.
just adjourn us. So till
Right.
next time, the meeting is adjourned. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.